Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Observable Flutter. I'm your host, Craig Labenz, and today we're going to be talking about MongoDB and their product Realm, which is a pretty darn cool backend database. Now, before we get too far into it, I do want to remind everybody that this is Flutter. This is the Flutter community, and deep respect for each other is extremely important to me. I hope it is to you as well. We're operating under the Flutter code of conduct and the YouTube terms of service and code of conduct and all that thing. So let's really, really be kind to each other. So this week, I'm very excited to be joined by Kasper Nielsen, all the way from Denmark, who is a senior software engineer at MongoDB and certified Realm expert. So let me bring Kasper in. Kasper, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you for having me here. Looking forward.
Yeah, me too. So the reason that you're here specifically now, as opposed to any other time, is that Realm has just released some updated support for Flutter, right?
Yeah, we went GA with the Flutter Realm SDK on the 7th of February. And yeah, that's why I'm here.
Nice. So the ink is still drying on the press release, I imagine.
Yeah.
Great. Cool. So I think there's going to be probably mixed, kind of the audience is going to have a mixed amount of knowledge about what MongoDB and Realm even are. So maybe if you want to start with just a little primer on, maybe even just first MongoDB and kind of its strengths and maybe a pinch of its history if you're interested, and then kind of Realm and how that builds on top of it, which I think is the right way to think about it. But
so MongoDB is sort of a fairly successful NoSQL database. It's a document-based database, and the big driver of today for MongoDB is their cloud offering called Atlas. And they acquired this little Copenhagen company called Realm back in 2018. And Realm's strength is its ability to synchronize data between devices and make it easy to use a local database on your device. You can think of when I introduce Realm to other developers, I typically compare it to SQLite, and that's sort of correct in the sense that SQLite is also an embedded database. We're both frugal with resources, be it memory or CPU cycles, but they are also very different in that SQLite is a relational database supporting SQL, and we are in object-oriented database. There's no sort of industry standard query language for those, so we have our own query language called Realm Query, RQL. I think one of the strengths of Realm is that it has a very good language integration across various languages. They're actually today, including all the C++ Alpha SDK, there are 9 different SDKs for various languages built on top of the Realm core, which is the C++ database in the bottom. And the Flutter and Dart SDK is the latest to reach GA status. Yeah.
Nice. So it was 8 on February 6th, huh?
Sorry?
You said there's 9 SDKs. I was just making a joke that it was 8.
Sorry. Yeah. 9 is counting the Alpha SDK, which we have a C++ Alpha SDK. So I guess we've been Alpha for a year about now.
Okay, got it.
So
so you mentioned that MongoDB had acquired Realm in 2018. I remember I was using Realm before I found Flutter when I was working on a project in just raw Swift and Xcode. I used Realm and loved it. And then I found Flutter. And my first disappointment with Flutter was that it didn't at the time have Realm support.
Cool.
Because yeah, there was just missing tech. FFI wasn't where it needed to be. So it's it's very full circle for me to be sitting here talking about how to use Realm and Flutter, because it is really darn cool. There's a couple of questions we have in the chat that I think we might as well just hit before they get too stale here. Bature says, how is MongoDB different from Couchbase DB?
Yeah.
And
so
do you know much about Couchbase?
No. I think that it's built on top of SQLite. So one thing that it differs on, the Realm has its own core database, but it's in the same space.
Yeah, because I think Couchbase is also a NoSQL store. So I think Mongo is slightly older. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, back in the late 2000, approaching the 2010 era, NoSQL databases were starting to catch on. Mongo was the first that I remember hearing about. But then I think some other flavors spun up. Potentially they were being developed in parallel. Maybe it was inspired by, I don't know. Yeah, pretty similar. But then you mentioned that Mongo's kind of core thing is Realm. Couchbase may kind of have a similar product like Realm, or it might not. I don't even know.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. I think at least maybe it's Couchbase Lite that's sort of built on top of similar to Firebase, also built on top of SQLite. But at least that respect we differ, that we have new code all the way down.
Got it.
The
another question here: is MongoDB Realm driver stable to use in Flutter? I think it is.
Yeah. So if I glean at this question, that it mentions the name driver. So we don't have a official Dart driver for MongoDB yet. So what we're talking about today is the Realm SDK for the local database, the Realm. So there's two sides to this. There's the local database Realm, which is an embedded database that you can use that has nice language integration. It sort of excels at these reactive architectures where you can listen to changes from the database in great detail. And then there's the Atlas app service suite, which sort of mimics a little what you got with Firebase, where you have one of the app services is device sync, so what we call Atlas device sync. And those two components sort of form the basis of how you sync data across devices in an offline first manner, that you would just write locally to your Realm database. You'll set it up so that synchronization happens with Atlas device sync in the background, and you don't have to write any network code. You don't have to write any conflict resolution code. We'll just handle it for you. And that is the value proposition of Realm and Atlas device sync.
Yeah, and I think Realm and Atlas device sync, but for now on, I'll just say Realm if that's accurate enough. Realm is uniquely strong at this. The offline first support, I think Realm is basically best in class on that. That's my understanding. I imagine if you're aware of someone else, you maybe don't feel that compelled to cite them right now, but
no, I think sort of with Google and you have this big product Firebase, which sort of sits in the same space. But I think when it comes to offline first aspects, I think Realm is more offline first than Firebase is. For instance, you have this aggregate functions and such that doesn't really translate well to offline. And if you want to, if you open a transaction in Firebase, it's actually an online thing. And so we differ in that sense. A transaction in Realm is just a local thing. So,
yeah. Well, I think it might be time to get into it. So you're going to drive today, Kasper, and I'm going to offer commentary and ask questions. And whenever you're ready, I think we could do it.
Yeah. So you're watching my screen now. We have 3 emulators here. So the thing I want to do today, try to repeat today, is that I want to create an app that synchronizes a list of items across multiple devices. And we're going to use Flutter, we're going to use Realm, and we're going to use Atlas device sync. You all know what Flutter is. I've just briefly explained the sort of Realm versus Atlas app device sync setup. So I'm just gonna start here from scratch, and I'm just gonna use Flutter create. To start out a new app, and I'm going to use the skeleton template, but it's already setting up a list view for me and sort of creating a better scaffold for an app, including some routing and localization if we were to use that, etc. Let's enable a few platforms here: iOS, macOS, M1 and M1. And then we have to come up with a name, and I usually call this listy. Maybe should I call this Craig's List? That would probably be inappropriate.
That is quite a good joke. I would usually refer to that as my list. Like, oh yeah, I got this off my list, and I let people get confused for a second.
So just gonna rearrange my windows here a little. Sorry. So now we have.
While you're doing that, while you're doing that, I was just thinking, all of our talk of this being offline first and whatnot, but it's of course not offline only, and we're going to ultimately deploy this to GCP today, right?
Yeah, I think that would be the appropriate thing to do. You could also deploy it to AWS and Azure, but you'd probably kick me out of your stream. So I'm going to use GCP today.
I'm not so harsh, but it is extra credit for using GCP for sure.
This is actually one of the benefits of using service like MongoDB Atlas, is that we're sort of cloud agnostic. We run on all the major clouds and even a lot of the smaller ones. So
one thought here real quick. If you're interested in it, it might improve the stream a little bit to kind of hide the file explorer and make the text, the code font size a little bigger.
Okay. Oh, that was a lot.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I would like to also have the device here sitting on the left.
Yeah, no, I think this is good. This is good.
So how
do we get started?
Yeah, how do we get started? So I'm just gonna choose a device here.
This is one area where the enhance trick does work. And the way these AIs are getting, though, it's going to be Command plus on a fuzzy image soon. And it's just going to be clear.
I think I need to restart my Visual Code here. So just
what issue are you having?
So it didn't sort of pick up the emulator. So here it is.
Oh,
iPhone.
Yeah.
So I have a Pro Max here on the left. Let's run it on that. So right now I'm just running the skeleton app that's generated with Flutter Create. I do hope to do like a Mason Brick, a Realm Starter Mason Brick eventually.
Nice.
You could get all this up and running just by one click. but I thought when preparing this talk that most people would probably be familiar with Flutter Create, and since there are only two really app templates there, either the counter app or the skeleton app, I sort of assume people are sort of fairly familiar with this app.
Yep. Yeah, I think, and if folks aren't familiar with the code, I mean, that's honestly okay for this demonstration. But if you want, you could maybe just click through. There's what, 3 screens on this?
Yeah, there's like nothing. There's this this list view, and you can go into item details. I'm not going to spend much time there. And then there's this little cog in the right corner where you can go to settings and change the theme, and it'll rebuild or re-render the widget 3 with the new colors.
Yep.
So this, what I want to do today is I want to add the ability to persist these items in a local database, and I want to add the ability to add and remove items. And once we've done that, I will enable the app to synchronize between devices. So,
amazing. Masterfully answered.
Oops. Thank you.
I clicked the wrong button. Okay. All right.
So I can feel I can feel my hands not working here. Sorry, that's what I want to use. Go to the sample item class. Okay, so the sample item, which is being displayed here on the left in the app, that is what we want to persist, and we want to use Realm for it. So obviously, one of the first things we need to do is, I'll just move that. Sorry, I'll just move this here. We want to add the Realm package to our project, and I'm also gonna add the collection package, and that's mostly just for one extension method called last or null.
Yeah. Nice.
So there we are. And then sort of the way you hook it up, you want to sort of specify what classes you want to store in the database. And you do that by annotating your, I'm really feeling the shakes here, with Realm model, the class. You're going to annotate the classes you want to persist with Realm model. And I've already done a mistake here, but I'll just illustrate how it looks when you use it. So the next thing we want to do is we want to pick up these annotated classes, and we want to generate a bit of binding code that sort of glues these into the Realm database. And to do that, we do like you always do in Flutter, we run a build runner tool. The only thing is that we sort of made it available from within the Realm package, so you can just use Flutter pub run Realm generate, and I'm gonna add this watch flag, which will just keep it running. So whenever I hit save, it will regenerate these little bit of bindings.
Nice. That's a really nice touch to put that in the library itself. I don't think many packages do that.
No, and you don't have to. You can just, if you prefer. It's sort of you know, we want to make the onboarding really easy. So by doing it like this, you just have to add the Realm package and you're up and running. Otherwise, you'd have a bit more setup to do. But
yep.
Yeah. So it ran. It already is complaining. I was saying I already introduced an error. It's saying that we are missing a prefix on the Realm model name, and pointing out that this is actually a super cool library you released there with this ability to annotate the code, I think. So on line 4, class sample item, we're missing a prefix. You should align the class name to match the prefix, either underscore $. So let's return and look at that. So the reason we do that is that we actually want to generate a class called sample item. So this realm model prototype cannot be called sample item. So I'm just going to add this underscore. Typically, I prefer to use underscore because it'll make the model private, so you don't sort of accidentally use it somewhere you shouldn't. But say you want to reference between files, between models, you have a link from one realm model to another, or a list of realm models that are defined in another file. You'd need to use $. So there's a lot of stuff here that sort of doesn't compile anymore. As a constructor, it's not named correctly. Just remove that because the generator will generate a constructor for us. And also, the field here is not initialized. It's not nullable, so it needs to be initialized. And so the way we do that maybe it's a little bit inelegant that we just mark this as late. We're really eagerly awaiting static metaprogramming.
Indeed.
Yeah. And the idea is sort of to change this once that land. But anyway, so if we go here and watch the generator running in the background, it has actually succeeded. We're getting this warning from SourceGen. We're using this combining builder from SourceGen to combine our output with other generators that we need to.
Yeah, the part file.
Exactly. Somebody needs to include the generated code. So.
And it's going to have to be you, Kasper. I don't know who else
It has to be me. Yeah. Okay. So and suddenly the red squiggle disappeared, and so I'll there's this. Actually, I'm a little annoyed that my focus activity bar is missing. There it was. So it generated this file, sample item.g, and we can see that it generated the class sample items. It's extending our realm model prototype, and it's overloading the getter instead of the ID field. There's some magic that ties it into the database. And there's some other stuff we can see later, but there's the ability to listen for changes and sort of get the schema of this class. So
very nice.
And that's sort of about it, what it takes to sort of make a class that can be persisted. So what I've done so far is I've just made it so that sample item can be persisted. I'm not actually storing anything in any database or even opening a connection to a database, let alone reading any items from the database. So that would be the next thing that we have to look at. I'll just start by looking at what doesn't compile. So there's this sample list view. Yeah, there was this. This is a very simple app, right? So there's just a constructed list of sample items. That's
not very database compatible.
No, so I'm just gonna say the sample list items will require that we pass in the lists, and that will probably make up. Yeah, it doesn't work anymore. So down here somewhere, we're creating a sample list item view. And for now, I'm just gonna pass in. Okay, it was named. I'm just gonna pass in an empty list. So what I expect to happen now is that I can restart this app. It will show an even less interesting interface with no sample items. And since we didn't persist the theme, it goes back to standard, which is right. Yeah. Okay.
All right, this is all making sense so far.
Yeah, that's good. So now we actually need to open the database and start reading from it, right? And oops, sorry. I'm feeling I can't type in front of an audio. I get adrenaline. I don't know why.
That's a universal experience. You're not alone.
I hope to be better at one day. Okay. In order to, so the database is called Realm. in Realm Parlor. So we're gonna open a realm with just constructing a new realm class, and that takes a configuration. And there is a number of configurations, and the really interesting one is flexible sync, which is going to allow us to synchronize data between devices. But before we get there, I'll just use a local database, and it takes just one required argument. It's called schema objects, which is going to tell the database how. Sorry, that's not what I want. I want to write sample item schema. How to hook up what objects to expect in the database and their schema. So this is what you want to write when you open the realm. I'm just going to leave out this part, sort of deliberately introduce an error, because we see this happen, that people sometimes forget to add the schemas, and I want to show that how that looks. So we'll get back to that. Now, obviously, we need to use this realm for something. So I'm just gonna open make a query that'll give us all items in the database. There's the query method you could use, but there's also a convenience. It's just called all, and we just want all sample items like that. You sound like you have a question.
Oh, and I was just gonna ask a question about what was returned by that all method.
Yeah.
But I might be jumping the gun.
We can hover over here. See, it's a realm of salts. So when you see stuff like this, you might think, okay, this might be expensive. What if this database contains like 20 million items? Are we just gonna fetch all of them here? That's not what's happening.
That'd be bad.
Yeah, that would be bad. All we're really returning is this realm result sort of is a cursor or pointer into the database that once you start accessing this result, then you're gonna fetch objects from the database. And say you're accessing index 2758, it's only gonna retrieve that particular object, and actually not gonna retrieve all of the objects, just gonna retrieve a pointer to it, so that if you actually access a property on it, then it's gonna access. So everything is very lazy with Realm. And that also means that another thing is that, say the database is updated, and there's some transaction writes maybe in another process, or another isolate, whatever, an sample item is written to the database, then all items will automatically reflect this. You don't have to rerun this query. This is when we say that realm objects or realm entities are live, that's what we mean, that it will automatically reflect this. So I'm only going to set this query up once here very early in main, and we're not going to, from here on, we're just going to read it, and it will, despite us doing writes to the database, it will just automatically reflect that.
Nice. Yeah. And I think for a lot of folks, seeing this kind of code in the main method, this is before run app has even been called, is a little, it feels unusual. But to just really hammer home what you're saying, no query has been executed yet. This variable, all items, is just like the potential for a query, but nothing has been loaded yet. No connection has been made. It's not like there's an open socket just waiting. Nothing has happened. Well, there might have been a socket open by line 10, right? But not by line 11. Is that right?
Yeah, it's so right now, since we're doing a local database,
there'd be no socket at all.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, queries in that sense are super cheap. I wouldn't even be concerned doing it inside a build method. They are super fast. They just return this the moniker to the potential to fetch data, and also sort of like fetching a property on a Realm object. It's not like it's a microsecond kind of thing, less than a microsecond kind of thing. So it's you shouldn't be too worried about
Got it.
the performance.
Nice.
Everything's lazy. Actually, I was working with helping with an issue on there was this guy who had problems making a list view perform. So it performed very well for him. But when he added the scroll bars around his list view, suddenly it didn't work so well, and he was sort of he was thinking there was a Realm issue. But really, what it is that if you have a list view that is inside a scrollable, and you don't specify item extent, then how does that scroll bar gets calculated? It basically has to go and measure every item that could potentially be viewed by this. And if you have 20 million, that's going to take a long time. So you can make a very simple test that doesn't even involve Realm, where you just okay, set item count to like a huge number, 4 billion or something, and then Flutter will disintegrate. So it's very important. It's very important to set item extent if you have very large lists that you want to scroll through really quick.
Yeah.
But doing that, you could like just scroll through 50 million items like butter through a knife through a butter. So yeah, maybe we can return to that later. So now we got this query set up. We want to use it for something. So I'm just going into here my app, and we're going to pass in this Realm results of sample items, call it items, have that in the constructor. Now we can use that down here in the sample list view. I'm just gonna pass on the items. It's not gonna fly because this is can't be, and also the type is not correct. So it's expecting a list of sample items, and what we give it is a Realm results.
Yeah, we're not giving you a list of sample items yet.
So yeah, and Realm results actually implements iterable. We did consider whether it should implement list. The thing about lists in Dart is that they're sort of mutable. You don't have like a read-only list. You do have unmodified list view, but it actually implements list. Yeah. So what we chose to do was we implement iterable, but we do support. So I could make this sort of red squiggle on the other file go away by making this iterable, but then I would introduce an issue down here where we actually in the list view builder access the items by index. So
the query the query result that does implement indexing.
Yeah. So I'll just even though it implements iterable, but it also has an indexer. So this will compile again. So now we sort of hooked it up so that we just need to, of course, pass the items that we just required here. So this should sort of put us in a green state again, right? So I could do a hot reload now, a hot restart, and we'd get a twice. Oh, this is, yeah, sometimes you have to, depending on what code changes you have, you need to do a hard restart.
Yeah.
We get
so
this,
what did we add here that made that required this hot restart?
So the so and hot restart. My point is, a hot restart won't even be enough right now. You see, we have this fail to load dynamic library, and the thing is, when I deployed this app, I just ran Flutter create, and then I deployed the app, and then later I added Realm. But Realm is a is a package that it's a plugin, so it has a native
Mhm.
component to it. And though as mighty as hot reload and hot restart are, they do not bring native code onto the device when you run them.
And the reason for that is that it's Dart's just-in-time, or it's JIT compiler that allows for hot restart, and just most other languages don't have that capability. It's actually one of the reasons people ask, why did Flutter choose Dart? The compiler capabilities of Dart were one of the important reasons. If you love hot restart, you love Dart.
And I truly love hot restart.
And hot reload, yeah.
And hot reload as well, yeah, even more.
But here we got to do full Big Daddy restart.
That's the thing. We just why does Go say something? I don't know. We do a lot of Go code in Mongo as well. So did I start debugging yet? So what do we expect to see now? So I actually expect to see another error. You might recall that I left out this schema from when I opened the realm, and we'll soon see realm complain about that.
We had that predicted in the chat. Is the error caused by the lack of parameters when initializing realm? We were getting a different error, and we were approaching this error. So good eye, Bruno.
Yeah, here it is. Realm error. Object type sample item not configured in the current realm schema. Add type sample item to your config before opening the realm. And if you see errors along this line, it's quite easy to get into this, to forget to add. Say you add more and more realm objects, and suddenly it won't open. We've seen people sort of struggle a little with that, but you quickly get used to it. So, and eventually, so because we know a lot about the graph, we know that, say, if sample item were to refer to another realm object, we already know that. So we could sort of use the transitive closure of the graph to decide what schemas to include. Well, that's for the future. We don't do it yet. So anyway, at least we should be able to start now. Still, there are no items in the database, but I'm claiming that we are now reading items of the database and showing the fact that the database is empty. So
claiming that you're reading an empty database is an easy claim to make.
Yeah, it's an easy make. It is.
So let's write something to it.
Let's do that. And so we want to create stuff in the items, and I'm just we could just do it somewhere down below, but I'm just gonna extract that little bit of logic out into a separate class. It's called list block. It's business logic component. I'm not going to use the block package today. So it's more the concept. So I'm just going to hoist this realm list out of the sample item list view and kind of initialize it in the constructor. And then we're going to have a new method called add new item that will conveniently populate our database. So a little more things to do here. Need to have a block, and we're going to initialize that from the constructor. There's nothing fancy here. Just need to read the items of the block. Okay. And there's probably somebody complaining that we're not passing in yet. So now it's no longer items, but we need to pass in a block, which will wrap those items. So,
nice, very nice.
Yeah, let's I changed the I changed the constructor, right? So that is a static code change. So I need to do a hot restart.
As opposed to the hot reload.
Exactly. When we save, we only do hot reload, and so I needed to do a hot restart. Okay. Obviously, we still don't have any database, anything in our database. We need to hook up this add new items, and we also need to actually implement it. So let's start by hooking it up. This is just a standard material app, so we have a scaffold here, which also means we can add a floating action button. So I think we should do that, and that needs something unpressed, and should probably also have a child.
The little icon button.
Some kind of
or does
icon.
It just take the icon?
Sorry?
Oh, I just haven't thought about a floating action button in actually a really long time. I was trying to remember what goes in it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think you can put all kinds of stuff into it. So I just say that.
So I'm guessing you're going to call add item in this onPressed method.
That's true. You got a floating action button. Nothing's hooked up, but onPressed should, of course, do something. We're just going to hook it up to add new item, which doesn't do anything yet. So we need to implement this. So what does it take to actually store a sample item in the database? Well, first we need a handle in the database. So I'm just going to...
yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah. Called _realm. And let's not worry about where we get it from right now. But once we have it, we could open the write transaction. And whenever you do changes to realm objects, you need to be within the realm, within a write transaction. So a lot of the idea of realm is that it should almost feel like you're not working with a database, like it's just objects that you can traverse. And but on the other hand, there is also sort of database specific functionality that's not readily available in any object-oriented language, such as transactions. So it's sort of a balance. And the thing is that we want transactions, so we need to open them. And once we're in the write transaction, we can insert into it. We just call it add. It's just a shorter word for insert. And we can insert any realm object, and sample item being one of them. And as we remember, there was this ID property, it's just an integer, and the constructor that was generated by the build runner tool is requiring that we pass that. So we just the idea is that it should just increment. This is where I'm going to use that one extension method I wanted from collection.
Yeah, last and all, nice.
Yeah. And if the thing is that as right now the database is empty, so last and all will return null. And if that's the case, we just start with 0. So 1 plus 0 gets us 1, and after that it'll be 1 plus whatever the last ID value was.
Ooh, now I have a question here, which the audience also has. Okay. And I hope I don't put you on the spot too much, but MD and I are wondering, is there auto increment?
Nope. So
interesting.
Yeah, that's but I hope that this sort of showed that it's you can live without it, but we do not have auto increment.
So would you then advise having string IDs essentially? Because numbers are just not going to be reliable.
No, I would, and that's all the thing, because in the end, this auto increment. What does auto incrementing means in a distributed system? So what we recommend is that you use some ID that you can that will be unique, that's generated on the device that will be unique to the device. So you want to use something like an UUID, or as you'll see in a minute, we have something called an object ID. That's a MongoDB concept, which you'd use where you might use a universal unique ID. It's a little less, it's just 12 bytes compared to 16. And it's actually more similar to a timestamp. It is basically a timestamp plus some entropy that's based on the process, and then a counter value. But in a distributed system, that's a good candidate for primary key, because you can create it locally without consulting any other peers in your system, and with high probability that it will be unique.
Where by high probability you mean astronomically high probability.
Yeah, astronomically high probability, but no guarantees.
Indeed. Okay, so I do have one other question. You mentioned without consulting other other parties in your system, is there just, I presume there's like an increment transaction? If I know I have an integer field, can I say add 10 to it?
You can.
And then I get the result?
And actually you can't in Flutter yet, but Realm does have the concept of a Realm integer. And it's just one of those things that didn't quite make it into the GA. It'll be there soon.
Be there soon. Okay.
I think there's like 3 data types that we really need to add. One of them is maps. We have list and we have set, but we don't have maps yet. People are waiting for that. The other one is
sorry, keep going.
Yeah, the next one is decimal 128, which is sort of it's used often with financial systems. And the last one is this Realm integer, because maybe we could talk about that a little. So the default conflict resolution strategy of Realm is last writer wins, meaning that basically if you have two updates happening concurrently on 2 devices, say one is updating the integer to 2 and the other one is updating the integer to 3, what should the final state? Should it be 2? Should it be 3? Should it be 2.5? And any sort of distributed system that sort of claims to be alpha first has to solve this for you. Be it if and the way that Realm and Atlas Device Sync solves this is the last writer wins. So we assign a timestamp to each of these updates, and the last timestamp, the update with the latest timestamp will win. And that's actually a little simplifying it a little, because timestamps in a distributed system
are also unclear.
Clocks are not sort of
magical,
guaranteed to be in sync. So academia sort of over time came up. I think the most famous one is Lambert clocks, that helps you organize the orders of events. And there's a lot of
sorry.
But Lambert clocks is only getting you that far. You want to do even better. You start using vector clocks. That's at the cost of storing some more state. And that's what Realm does. We use vector clocks to order all updates, and the last one will win. But say you have a counter. So say you have a counter. Say you have this. Actually, I think this is one of the things that the Firebase struggles a little with. Say you want to add a rating to a product. I want to give it 4 stars. And we want to have an average. So we want to divide the ratings by the number of ratings, the sum of the ratings by the number of ratings, right? So say in Firebase, what you'd do, you'd add your rating, and then either you would open a transaction and update an average within that transaction at the same time as you added the rating, which would require you to be online, or you would use a cloud function to sort of monitor that a rating was added on the back end. Once that happened, you would update the average, and then that would be synced back to the devices. there are two problems with it. Either you can't make ratings if you're not online, or you can make ratings, but you won't actually see the average until you get online, and so you can't even see your own rating. But the way you would handle this in Realm instead is you would have two Realm integers, because Realm integers, as you said, just tracks the deltas. It's not last writer wins. It will also, if one added 1 and another added 4, it'll converge to altogether 5 was added. And this makes it super easy to make this kind of functionality. You can just take the sum of all ratings and divide by the number of all ratings, and that'll just work. Even so, if you haven't seen 7 ratings from your peers, your average will just be different, but you will still have an average that includes your own rating.
Oh, that's super interesting. I want to try to describe back to you what I think you're saying. Yeah. Essentially have 2 Realm integers, and let's say 5 people have supplied ratings, and they each gave it 2 stars. So we'd have 2 numbers. One of them would be 5, which is the number of people who have supplied a rating. And the next rating would be, or the next number would be 10, which is the total number of stars. And so then at any given time, when we want to calculate that average, it's, we do the division and we see that the rating is just 2 stars because they all gave that rating. And then that is what would allow someone who's offline and gives it 5 stars to see the average rating go up, because suddenly the numbers become 15 and 6 or whatever numbers I'm using in this example.
Yeah, but and also if say the guy who gives 5 stars, he has only seen the ratings from 2 of his peers. So that'll be 2 plus 2, and then his 5 star, that'll be 9 and divided by 3. So the average will be 3, which is not so he can see that his own rating is reflected somehow in the average. Yeah. Even though he may not be online yet. So eventually when he comes online, everybody comes online and all the other ratings tick in. You have 5 2s and 1 5, you have 15, and you can divide that by 6. I can't do that in my head, but that will be the true average. And everybody will converge to that as they see each other's ratings. And it's not like Realm it's not a peer-to-peer system. We are hub and spoke, so everything sort of goes through the server,
mothership, so to speak.
And it's not like the algorithm would actually work peer-to-peer, but the thing is, when you use vector clocks, you have to keep track of the last seen timestamps from each of your peers. And if you do that in an incomplete graph, you basically have in faculty state to keep track of. Whereas if you do it in a hub spoke, you just have 2 times the number of nodes. So that got a little technical.
No, it's good. So I do want to share one idea for an auto increment. If you really want an auto increment, and you can't do this yet because Realm object has not been ported to the Flutter SDK for Realm, but it's coming, so you could do it soon. And there's caveats on this, but you could have a single integer on the server, and you open a transaction and increment that integer when you want to write a new object. And then once it increments, you know that the number that it just incremented to is your primary key. It can't be anyone else's primary key because of the magic of transactions. Now, I said there's caveats because if you're constantly writing to this table, all those writes will be queuing around this transaction that might be being opened from tons and tons of devices. So if it's a heavily written to table, I would not do this. But if it's
are you talking about Firebase now? Are you sort of speculating on
a way someone could kind of roll their own auto increment on Mongo?
Yeah, no, that won't actually work, Craig, because the thing is, you're just sort of announcing that I'm incrementing it 1, and locally I see, okay, say the guy who was
if I'm offline.
Yeah, so I think that the value is now 9. So we are very much offline first. Transaction just happens locally, and all conflict resolutions happen afterwards. So it's very difficult to do these automatic auto increment with device thing. It's sort of the cost of being truly offline. That's where we differ very much from Firebase, because when you open a transaction, you're actually sort of going all the way.
You're committing it immediately.
Yeah.
I didn't think about the fact that that scheme. Wow. So being as offline first as Realm is actually just like conceptually, philosophically incompatible with auto increments. It's probably not going to ever happen.
It's not going to ever. It's not going to ever happen. I think that's. I don't see how that happens.
Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense. That's really clarifying.
Yeah. So what you want is these random primary keys.
Yeah.
And you could use something like UUID. I recommend object ID. The nice thing about object IDs, since they are more or less timestamps, they are not timestamps, but they are more or less timestamp, means that if you order a set of object IDs, they will more or less be ordered in the order they were created, assuming that the clocks are somewhat reasonably in sync. And that has benefits when it comes to locality and such. Anyway,
all right.
Let's return to the sample here.
Yes.
We get this little red squiggle on the list block. It's complaining that we're not initializing the underscore realm.
We're not giving it the database.
Yeah. So I could take this in the constructor, but actually I'm going to just for now piggyback on the feature that any realm entity, including realm results, knows its own realm. So get it like that. Yeah. Okay. So now we have something. Should be hooked up. Just press this button a couple of times. Nothing happens. But that's just because. Let's just put a breakpoint there. Oh, we did hit this add new item, and we are running these write transaction, and apparently no errors happen. So I'll just go in here, change the theme to dark, because that's of course every widget to re-render, including the list view here. And now we have our items. And if I was to restart this app, which would sort of reread maybe I can just go to main here, put a breakpoint, I do a restart. Okay, so it's actually rerunning main. We would see that the items are still there.
They persisted.
They persisted. But obviously, the fact that they don't appear immediately when we hit this fab is not kosher. So let's fix that.
Yeah, so we're currently writing to the database, but not updating the UI.
Yeah, and it's not that the query, the all items were updated. So when I went in and changed the theme and came back, we're still just reading from that all items that we set up once in main, and the items were there. The only thing that caused this not to be shown was that we weren't calling set state anyway. So we was being rendered. So we obviously we could do that. We sort of hook it up here somewhere that set state needs to be rendered. That would be horrendous and ugly. But the nice thing about these live realm objects, apart from that you can just read the latest state, is that they can also announce whenever they change. So every realm entity has a changes stream. If we just go to this sample D item, you see this we talked about earlier. It returns a stream of realm object changes of for the sample item class. So let's try and use that. So let's go down here in the list view and just wrap this with a stream builder. All that adrenaline. So we're just going to take from the blog. We got the items, which was the result set, and that has changes. So, and now I think that should be that did it, right? I always forget. You should, of course, check the snapshot if it has data.
Being a good citizen.
Yeah, exactly. If not, you should return something else than the list view. So I'll just do a circular progress indicator. Might want to wrap that in a
const, yeah. I think it just wants to come.
so
Oh, you're gonna wrap it in the center. I see.
Oh, sorry. Like that. It's not. I've done this before. It's not that it's gonna. Let's just try and restart.
We might get it for one. Yeah, it was the tiniest flicker.
Yeah, exactly. I think we can. Can you spot it? There we have a circular. It's just not grown very big yet, but the thing is the local database is so fast, and this is sort of one of the advantages of using an offline first database. We never wait for the backend. Once the backend gets the data ready and we receive it, then we'll react to it. But even on the first load of the page, we'll just read quickly from the database. Okay. So we can add stuff. We better think we should also be able to delete stuff. So I'm getting very affectionate to tailing commas.
Right? There's no other way to live.
Exactly. So, when I first saw them, they just looked odd, out of place. But now I love them.
Yeah, I love what they do to the rest of the formatting. That's why I'm
fan. Yeah. So let's just extract this list tile. This is gonna add a little more. Sample item. I'm really losing my ability to type. Sample item type. So what do we want to do? So I usually when I want to sort of delete action, I'll make a swipeable thing. And, that means that we want to wrap this list tile widget with a dismissible. That's going to require a key because it's animating between different states of the list. We need something that's uniquely identifies the tile, and that's very conveniently we can just use ID for now. We're still local. We're just incrementing the last scene ID. What else? This should.
It's getting exciting now.
Yeah. So probably add a background. I always want to. I like delete actions to be red. Just jives better with me. So like that. Obviously, nothing really happens yet. So what we want to do is we want to delete the item in the database. So once again, let's just hoist out that bit of logic into a block. And again, I'm not using the block package. I'm just sort of using the concept of a block. Actually, I think this is what the block package would call a qubit, because I'm not. I'm adding methods instead of streams. So, yeah, this was the item. We'll hoist out just. Man. And then we want.
You're doing great.
You think so? I'm losing the ability to type. It's late in the day
for you. It's very late in the day for you compared to me.
I think it's the adrenaline. I don't know. I haven't done many of these streams, so.
I think you're a natural.
Thanks. There was an item block. We got a block again. Something like that. We take it in the constructor. Okay. Something won't compile. Obviously, we need to, this item, we don't have direct access to it, so we're just gonna take it from the block. And there's this one up here. Yeah, the sample tile now takes a block. And that's item block. wrapping the item. Okay.
And the reason you're doing this is because you don't want to pass the Realm DB object to widgets. Is that right?
Yeah, I just find that sort of this is not UI logic. This is us updating the database.
Right.
This should happen. It felt odd to do it directly in the UI.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Just that a lot of demos like this kind of don't take. And this is not a knock, but they kind of don't take that extra step to write something in an even vaguely realistic way. And it kind of seems like, we're doing a lot here, we're moving a lot of things around, but that's really just because you don't, you're refusing to pass the Realm object to widgets, which is great.
Yeah. So it's like the Realm object itself, I'm not passing, but I am of course passing Realm entities like the sample item and the also the widget is reading the items, which is the Realm results off of the block. So it's not like completely hidden from the widget. Anyway, I think there's another thing we need to do. First of all, here we are. We need to, of course, implement delete, and sort of it goes by the kind of the same structure as before. We're just gonna, instead of taking the realm into the constructor, I'm just gonna read it off the item. The thing, eventually, you might want to actually pass it in the constructor because of a feature I've been talking about. You can freeze realms. So one of the nice things about realm items is that they're alive, but sometimes it also gets in the way. Say, for instance, actually the block package. So you have this stream of changes. It will show you the prior state and the current state, or is it the current state and the next state? I can't remember, but it's sort of it shows you two versions. It'll stream two versions of the object, and if your object is alive, it'll be the previous version is already updated. So it'll be like there is no diff, and that might be not what you want to do. So you really want to have sort of an immutable version of the object to compare to.
Got it.
There's this, we saw it just briefly in the generated file. There's this, you can freeze a realm object or any realm entity really, which basically what it does is it freezes the realm that the object belongs to. And that's a constant time operation. The full object graph will be frozen in constant time, which is pretty amazing actually. And it's not like it's doing a deep copy of the entire object graph. There is a cost to it that if you keep those frozen objects around, it sort of prevents the database from cleaning up that version. So don't hold too many of them. I'll make sure to release them. But it's an easy way to create an immutable object. And if you do that, you can't open a realm transaction on a frozen realm. So say the sample item had been frozen, taking the realm off of that frozen item will not give us a realm that we can actually use to make changes. We need a live realm for that. So that was a bit of a detour, but for now, all we have to do is just inside a write transaction, we want to call realm delete on the item. So, and that should almost bring us there. I think maybe I did not. Yeah, I did not. We should also hook it up here on dismissed. So we're just gonna, sorry about my typing. Call block delete when on dismissed is pressed. So now I'm claiming if I do like that, items disappear. And if I do a hard restart, also it should stay, yeah. Woo. We can now add and delete and persist
Nice.
items. Yeah.
Basic
Ah.
CRUD.
Basic CRUD. Impressive, right?
Yeah.
I know this is maybe not so impressive yet.
But it's about to get good.
Yeah, I hope you will find that it's getting better. So how's time coming along?
The content is more important than the time. So if you're still good,
yeah,
we're still good.
I'm still good. It was just so the thing I need to do now is I need to set up a backend, and my plan was to do that on the show, and I think I have time to do it. So I'll continue with that. Otherwise, I do have a pre-cooked backend setup. So just in case, especially today, because I know that the SO guys are rolling out an update, and, you never know.
Oh God. So, okay, that's very smart. But yeah, let's try to configure. I don't think it's too tedious. So
I'll try to configure backend. So I'm gonna do some of it here from the command line, and so could remind me to restart this generator.
Okay.
Anyway,
got it.
Thank you. We have this command line tool called Atlas. You can install it with brew. I think it's called MongoDB_Atlas CLI. That will allow you to set up resources on Atlas and the MongoDB cloud offering. And the first thing you want to do is you want to log in. So associate your command line with a account on MongoDB, and let's see. So, and because I have too many browsers open, it's not opening the window.
No idea where that will go.
So I'm just gonna explicitly sorry.
So account/connect.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it was actually correct. And I already have set up this this burner account on Google. It's called flutterrealm@gmail.com. And now I have to sort of associate this. I need to associate this one-time verification code.
Oh, so that verification code prints to the CLI.
Yeah.
And then you copy it into the browser.
Yeah, because so the CLI it contacts Mongo with a session key, you could say, and that is
interesting.
Then signed.
It's the other direction of how it normally goes, but
yeah, I kind of like it. It's sort of it's very easy and convenient, very safe way to go about it. So I'm just going to confirm this authorization. So now your account is ready. Just let's go and look at it. It's going to take a little while. Okay. So now I'm here in the dashboard. So what I was talking about, I was having the listed project backup that we could use should we run into trouble. But I'm going to set up a new project.
Yeah, let's do it. I think that'll be great. I'd love to see it.
So we want to just first I'm just going to list. We can see this one project we already have, but we're going to create a new one. Call it the Observable Flutter listy.
Where are you typing? I'm not seeing any changes on your. Okay.
No, I couldn't do that.
There it is.
Can you see it?
I see it now. Yeah, I think it was just lagging for a second.
Okay.
I also see an error. Oh, it must not have liked the. Yeah.
It didn't like the brackets. That was new info to me.
Yeah.
So I'll just I'll just set this because otherwise I'll mess it up. I'll just set this this project ID as my default. So,
by the way, I don't know when you need to do this, but at some point you need to restart a generator.
that's true. And that is when we get back to the client side of things, because
Great. I'll say it again.
there are
then.
some stuff we need to change in the model in order for the backend
Look
and
to sync.
we need to agree on the primary key, and that means that I have to do changes to the sample item, and when I do that, I need to rerun the generator.
The generator.
And it's like 99% certain I'll miss that. Maybe not today. You already reminded me. Okay, so we need a few other resources. We also need to set up a cluster. We're just going to call that listed cluster. And this is it's going to complain. We're not telling it enough. We need to set a provider. And this is where, as I promised, we're going to use Google Cloud Platform. So,
Exciting.
it's the only one to use, right? So the region's just going to be, I'm just flattering you guys. It's just going to be Western Europe, and we're going to choose a tier, and we're going to use, it's called M0. I'm not sure why, but it's the lowest tier you can choose, and it has the distinct advantages of being completely free.
That's a good advantage.
Yeah, and I promise to say forever. I don't know if I should say forever, but it's like you would never have to enter a credit card. Though I would say though that since stuff that is free, people kind of tend to forget, and they don't shut it down if they don't use it. So we are a bit aggressive about sort of shutting it down stuff that is not getting used. So say you have this very rarely used app that somebody only checks in every once in a month or so, you may find that your cluster has been terminated, but you can always start it up again. So that's it. So let's just go to the UI here again, the web UI. Let's see, should be, now there's I call it the listy app. Maybe I should call it the listy project. And in there we have cluster, and yeah. And as much as I would like to do the rest from the command line, because I am mostly a command line kind of guy, in particular, since we chose Google Cloud Platform as our provider, there are stuff that I cannot use to set up with the current tool. It's called Realm CLI, by the way. As you said, in the prior days, the backend app device sync was also called Realm, but that changed this summer, so we're rebranding, and there's some tooling that hasn't completely followed through. They're working on it. I know it should be ready within a month or two, I think. But anyway, the rest of the thing I'm going to set up in the web UI because that has the ability. That's the Realm logo. Just shortly you saw it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just going to build my own app here. And it's already picked up my cluster. I'm going to call this something a little less stupid. And this is the thing I couldn't set up in the Realm CLI. If I had to use that, it would force me to use AWS here, which of course is not kosher. Not only because I'm on a Google show, but also because we really want the app services to be co-located with our cluster. We don't want to traverse the world whenever we do it. Yeah. So
yeah, that would hurt.
Stupid. Yeah, it would hurt. You could actually see that on the show if we did that. Anyway, we're creating the app services. And then there's all kinds of guides. We'll just quickly make that go away. And there's really only one service we need to enable today, and that's device sync. And By the way, notice that our app got this little app ID. We're just going to copy that for later because that's what we're going to use to hook up the client to this particular app service instance.
Nice.
So we can enable device sync, start syncing, and it asks us if it wants to generate a schema from some existing data. We don't really have any existing data, so no. And then first thing we need to choose is whether we want to use flexible sync or partition-based sync. And as a Flutter developer, that's an easy choice because we can only choose flexible sync. We do not support partition-based sync. And we don't intend to do that, as I understand it. The thing is that partition-based sync is more or less being deprecated. It'll be supported, but it's
not the future.
It's not the future. And to sort of talk about the distinction, flexible sync basically allows you to specify what subset of data you need to synchronize with using queries. So obviously the backend data may contain a lot of data and you don't want all of that on your device. So you can specify the subset that you're interested in, and you can do that in a very flexible way using queries. Whereas the old way of doing it was that every object was tagged with a partition, and the client had to choose exactly what partition it wanted to synchronize with, which is a lot less flexible. It's also very easy to implement, say, partition-based using flexible sync. You can just add such a tag to all your objects and do the same. Anyway, flexible sync is the future. So next thing we have to choose if we want to use development mode. And during development, I strongly recommend you do that. Don't do it in production. What development allows you to do is something that sort of happens automatically for you. Say I was to change the schema. Right now we don't have a schema on here. So the first time my client contacts the backend, it'll know a schema, and the backend will say, okay, let's use that. And as long as the changes you would do on the client, as long as they are, where did it go here? Sorry, disappeared. Are you still there, Craig? Craig?
I had muted myself, but yeah, I'm here.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. There you are. There. Okay. As long as the changes you are making are additive changes, we can also you add new fields, new classes, etc. Then the backend will just accept the new schema. If you change, say, the type of a field or do other sort of destructive changes, then this will stop working, and the easy way out is just to recreate the backend and start over.
But you can do if you're just in development mode still.
Exactly, and also you don't want to enable this in production because, say, some rogue client,
of course,
with an old version or whatever,
you never want to enable anything that says development mode in production.
Exactly.
That's why it's named development mode.
Exactly. So then we need to select a cluster. No, we did that. We only have one. And we need to select the database name. This is, so now we are on the backend. So this is a MongoDB database. It's not a Realm database. And we don't have one, so we're just going to make one. Like that. Okay. Then you can configure the queryable field. If you have worked with Realm before, you know you had to do that. That's no longer required when you're in development mode. Then it's optional. The thing is, when you do these queries, that defines your subscriptions. You are querying various fields in the database, and the backend needs to know that these fields are used for synchronizing queries in order to perform well. It needs to add indexes to them and such. But in development mode, that happens automatically for you now. So we don't actually need to specify it. Also, for this particular demo, I'm not doing anything particularly interesting. I'm just gonna use the mandatory _ID field for actually, I'm just going to sync down everything. So every device will see everything, which is, of course, highly unrealistic.
Yeah,
but
a little bit.
Yeah. But this sort of gets to talk about this this shared primary key that the client and the backend needs to agree on. It's got to be called _ID, and this is what
we're going to have to
use to we track to see that objects are identical. So, and then we need to define some permissions. Now, so far we sort of just left it to the client to decide what subset of data it wants to sync. But it could say everything if it was an evil client. I also want to see my neighbor's purchases, whatever. So we need to add yeah, exactly. So we need to add a set of permissions on top of this. And these are, of course, handled by the backend. And you can see the data that is actually synchronized to your device is the intersection of what you asked for and what you're allowed to see. Yeah. But I'm just going to be really stupid and allow everybody to read and write all data.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty convention for development mode.
Yeah, especially for a demo like this.
Yep.
There's some advanced configuration as well. I don't think. So how far back in time do we allow clients to fall before we sort of force them to reset? We need to maintain some history in order to do this conflict resolution elegantly. And there's a cost to that. And say you fall behind by more, I think the default is 30 days. If a device falls behind more than 30 days, or I wouldn't say all bets off, but at least the nice conflict resolution is out the window, and we just do a hard reset. So you can configure how far back you want that to work. I'm gonna enable it.
All right.
And there's this general thing with Mongo. You sort of get to review your changes, and the changes are really just a set of configuration file JSON, as you see here, and you would store these in your Git repo. We're not going to do that today. So I'm just going to deploy it. One thing to notice perhaps is that we are enabling something called anonymous user. An auth provider called anonymous user, which will allow us, which we're going to use to log in soon. Okay, this should be it. Hope it wasn't too tedious. So back to the client, and now you have been a good boy, Craig. You reminded me that I needed to
restart the generator.
Exactly. Thank you. I
have my moments.
So, you sure do. I mean,
what would they say?
I'm a fan. So let's go back to where we actually opened the realm. So as I said, the interesting configuration was flexible sync. Just set up a flexible sync backend, and I was putting this red squiggle because we're not providing the right arguments. So we still need to pass in the schema objects. That's what's going to be used in development mode to set up the correct schema on the backend. But we also need to pass in a user. And how do we get a user? Well, first we need to sort of handle on the app service that we just created, and that's just called the app class. And that takes an app configuration. That takes a whole lot of bunch of arguments, but there's just one crucial one, is this app ID that I copied out during the configuration.
Now, inquiring minds will want to know, is that value sensitive?
No, it's not.
It's sensitive.
This is not sensitive. It's just like an URL, really. It's a moniker to a lot of sense.
Got it. So all auth, all security is elsewhere. That can be right in the code. Doesn't have to be a secret, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Because it's basically impossible to keep a secret on. Everybody can decompile your app.
The client. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how do we get the user from the app? Well, maybe there's already a logged in user, in which case we can just get it. This will work offline. App.current user. If you're previously logged in, you're still logged in here. But say you wasn't ever logged in, you need to log in. And to do that, we just call app.login and pass a set of credentials. And since I enabled the anonymous auth provider, it means that, yeah. And basically, what is the anonymous auth provider really doing? So we are creating a user here, and it is uniquely identified, but it's only on this device. So whenever we'll use this, even if I didn't do this app current user thing, we'll use the same credentials for this particular device.
So then if you create an account later, you own whatever records you've made along the way.
Yeah, you can actually associate a anonymous account with a validated one, say using a federated authentication. I think I want to do a demo at one point where I integrate with Firebase auth UI, which would give you a job.
That package is so nice. Yeah.
But yeah, and it's actually super easy to work with Firebase auth, I think, with the UI package. So it shouldn't take that long. Anyway, now we've got a user. So
that was the first parameter, right?
Yeah, like that.
Nice.
So what else? So I was talking about these subscriptions. I need to set up subscriptions telling what subset of data that I'm interested in. I'll leave that out for now because I want to show some errors that occurs when we don't have that. Basically, by not subscribing to anything, I'm saying I'm not interested in anything. So let's try and rerun this. Oh. So this is the first error we get. It's complaining there must be a primary key property named _ID. Remember that _ID that we saw in the queryable fields? We didn't actually add that to sample items yet. And we're gonna rename this thing ID because we want to use ID for something else. Just call it number. What did people do before we had these automated refactorings?
Cried, I think.
Yeah, I know I did. Okay, and I'm going to use this object ID class that I was talking about, which is basically like a timestamp plus a little entropy for the process plus a counter. So let's call that ID. I'll make it public because I like to use it a little later. And this needs to be a primary key in order to specify on Realm that the field is a primary key. You just annotate it with primary key. But the backend would like it to be called _ID, so which would make it private in Dart. So we just have to do this. You see this a lot in Flutter code. So something don't compile. Yeah, obviously now when I construct the sample item, I need to also pass in an object ID, and I can just pull it out of. I'm almost tempted to say my ass, but out of thin air.
Well, you did say it.
Yeah, sorry. No, I didn't. And it's basically reading the time and doing that little bit of adding that little bit of extra entropy from the process.
And folks in the chat were asking about like, why isn't there an easier auto ID option? And this is basically it.
Yeah. That's
Nice.
and in a distributed system, it's just much more convenient to have your primary keys be something that can be generated offline, and that means something you're going to use some randomness to ensure that. We could also use the UUID. It's just sort of with MongoDB, it's common to use
somewhat similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So
I anticipate that we're getting close.
We are getting close. So, oops, all items disappeared. Yeah. Why did they disappear? They disappeared
because
we're
now
no longer
database.
Exactly, Craig. Now it does of course exist locally on disk, but it's in a different position due to the login stuff.
Zombie database.
Yeah. Let's see. Oops, that's the next arrow we're gonna hit. So I tried to press plus, and it says can I write to a class sample item when no flexible sync subscription has been created. So it's basically telling us, okay, so you're interested in no data, yet you're writing data. What gives? So you need, what would happen if, basically what happens if you write outside of the subscriptions of the data you're interested in? You have, the backend will fix that by doing what we call a compensating write. They'll remove the item again. So, and this sort of catches a lot of people off guard. So, and sort of the most common reason is that they never set up any subscription. So we put in this convenient little exception to sort of
Smash
at least
that
one against
subscribe button, man. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
You press that bell icon.
So we're gonna add a subscription, and a subscription is just a query. You just it's just specified by query, and you don't these are persisted. So when just because you restart the app doesn't mean that your subscriptions are gone. But there's really no harm in setting them up on every run.
Okay.
Sorry, it's not called. It's called. And for now, I'm just. If you have a lot,
we're saying we care about all sample items.
Yeah, exactly. I'm building a very
very public
distributed system here. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we have a subscription. So I hope that I will be able to. I just need to.
We may. Did you ever restart the? Oh no, you don't need to restart the generator because you had it on watched.
Yeah. So.
Nice.
Now I can create stuff again, and I can delete stuff again, and but that's not so impressive because this is just one device. So let's start another device. Where did that go? Flutter select device. As you may notice, I have 3 other devices set up over here on the left. I got a Pixel, I got an iPhone 14 Plus, and the iPod. Yeah. So, and this is one of my favorite feature of all your tooling is that you can debug multiple sessions at the same time.
It is pretty slick.
It is so slick. So let's do the one thing that annoys me though is that I can't just press F5 here. For some reason, I need to go to the and then I can. Oh yeah. If somebody will lend me their ears, I would like to complain about that. So
that's fair.
And actually, even another cool thing is that we can. So I kind of lost my ability to choose down here. I can even start multiple builds at the same time. So I'm gonna do one for the iPhone 14 as well, and let's also do the iPad. Sorry.
Your computer is like, really, Kasper? Really? Yeah. Everything at once?
Everything at once. I mean, they gave me one of these M1
can do everything at
Pros.
once machines.
it's amazing fast machine. Still, it does take a little time. So anyway, fix this up.
Hey,
We got items here. Should work. So 8. It looks similar, right? So let's try to remove the last item here.
yeah, 8. Get out of here, 8. Okay, we switch back. It's already gone. Can't even
3.
switch back fast enough.
I can't. These should be up soon.
One would hope.
So
yeah, those must be.
those are
old
ones. Oh, here we got
okay.
one more. Now we can see
Very
it.
good. Very good.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm sort of surprised we don't. Did I not start it on the?
I thought you did, but
yeah, I sort of did too. It was an iPhone 14 Plus. Maybe I took the Pro. Anyway, there you have it. Synchronization. I hope you
Very
find
nice.
that the last stuff that I did to actually enable it client side was kind of unintrusive. Yeah.
Now, because this is offline first, is there an easy? Could we like put one of these in airplane mode or something and demo the offline first part?
Yeah. So that's super you can't really do that with the iOS simulators. You have to put your entire device, your entire laptop in offline mode, which is super annoying. Luckily, luckily Android is a lot less stupid, so we can just put this this pixel into airplane mode.
Airplane mode. Okay, nice.
So I'll just remove an item here. You can see
and of course it
synchronized.
didn't. Yeah,
it didn't propagate through the Android device. And just do something here. So now the Android. Notice this actually reminds me of one thing. I don't know if it's going to cause. Maybe it's going to cause us trouble.
Well, there's the number, but object ID is different. Should be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Only the thing is that.
Oh, the value, the key.
Yeah, the value key for the.
Well, can you make it underscore ID? No, you won't be able to do that because it's underscore ID.
Yeah. No,
or just .id.
Yeah.
No, it should work because it's not number in there. Oh, it is number.
Yeah, because the thing is, I did a refactoring, right? I just renamed the ID to number, and that included this place. And number is no longer unique, so I really still need the ID, which is unique.
Yep.
So and I should probably notice how it hot reloaded on all 3 devices. That's probably enough. Pretty slick.
Yeah, I think that should. I know what you're getting at here. Once you take it out of airplane mode,
I'm worried that we're gonna have an issue with the dismissible item because the value key was wrong.
Yep.
So, but let's
try it.
Let's try it. Yeah. So take it out of airplane mode and
back to the
go
app.
back. So and it is going to take a little time because Realm doesn't automatically detect that the network changed. It's sort of working on this exponential backoff scheme, and since I talked a little too long, it already sort of incremented to a certain state. But the easy way to fix this, and maybe we could do that soon, is to say take a dependency on the connectivity plus plugin.
Yeah. Would it try again if you tried to create a new one, or would it still just be like, oh, no,
it'll still. Yeah, I think it's. So
hey, there they are. They showed up.
So and you want you want it to wake up quicker, and the way to do that is let's go and do it. Actually, it doesn't take a long time. So depending on our time, I'm just going to break this one again. So we're going to add a
I think we're definitely near time now. So
okay. Anyway, so just stop me if it's too much. This is called Connectivity Plus. Did I spell that correctly? Actually, this is also a plugin, so this we'll have to restart anyway. You do
Yeah,
something
I think
like
we can probably leave that as a reading exercise for the
I'll do that.
reader.
Yeah.
Nice though. That was great. It seems like we got to the finish line.
Yeah. So it has been a pleasure to be on your stream, Craig.
Yeah, thanks for joining. I just want to hit some questions real quick here. This one's from quite a while ago. We answered that. You can set a primary key. Ended up getting to that. Scrolling down. Someone a long time ago said, "What is Realm?" It's a client-side SDK for MongoDB with offline first data syncing. You may have also deduced that by the end. Someone also said for it to sync, we have to hook up with Atlas, right? That was before we did the whole hookup with Atlas. So now we've walked through that. Excuse me. One question. Someone says, is the data encrypted locally?
No, not currently. So say you on at least an iOS device, your storage will be encrypted when at rest anyway. But you can add encryption to the database. You need to specify what key to use, and you store that somewhere in the secure element on the device. But I didn't use it today, but we do support it.
Got it. Okay, so not by default, but can be done.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, cool. I think that is a great place to call it. Kasper, thank you for joining and walking through. We made a to-do list app, essentially. We made a list app, persisted those things locally first, just using Realm. So for Flutter developers who are pretty experienced, at that point, we kind of had a Hive-like situation going. And but Hive is always and forever local storage. So we escaped containment, we reached escape velocity, and we got to the server by adding MongoDB and data sync through Atlas. And that allowed 4 emulators to all talk to each other very simply, including when one went offline via some cruel airplane mode enforcement from you, our flight attendant. And then when we took it off airplane mode, it woke up a second later and synced to all the other devices. Pretty good.
Correct. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it went so well.
Yeah, no, well done. You're a pro. Cool. Well, everybody, that will wrap it up for this week. And next week, I have an extremely exciting guest. And I don't think anybody is going to want to miss it. So until then, I will see you all later.